So I've just watched Chief Red Tory in Scotland, Kezia Dugdale, attempt to put a few questions to the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, about the SNP's record on the NHS, bearing in mind that the budget the Tories will be cutting going to Scotland will determine how much can be spent on the NHS. It's pretty humiliating for Kezia Dugdale, to be honest. Well, that's my opinion. See what you think.
The NHS is our most precious public institution. The dedicated staff who work in our health service help to bring us into this world, and they care for us in our time of need. The delivery of NHS services depends on having motivated and well-supported staff. But this week, the scale of the pressure on our NHS because of SNP cuts and mismanagement was exposed. The Royal College of General Practitioners warned of a deepening GP crisis, and the RCN said that there needs to be a change in the health service, and quickly. Presiding Officer, our NHS is at breaking point. Hard-working, loyal staff are crying out for help. I wonder if the First Minister can tell me how many days were lost in our NHS last year due to staff stress.
First Minister, well, firstly, I agree that the NHS is our most valued, most cherished, most precious public service. I also agree that it couldn't and wouldn't be delivered without the dedication and the contribution of the staff working in our National Health Service. That's why, Presiding Officer, I am very proud that since this government took office in 2007, we've seen an increase in the number of people working in our health service of 10,500 people. We're also increasing the budget of the NHS next year by £500 million. And of course, as well as that investment, we've set out very detailed plans about how we want to reshape and reform the National Health Service to build up social care. So £250 million of that investment will be invested to increase social care, how we want to improve primary and community care to keep people out of hospital, but also when people do have to go into hospital, we plan 5 new elective treatment centres to make sure they can get that care quickly and efficiently. Finally, Presiding Officer, I noticed that Kezia Dugdale mentioned comments from the Royal College of GPs and the RCN, and we listened very carefully to what both of these organisations have to say. I noticed, though, that she omitted to mention the comment from yesterday of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, which said that the UK has the best performing A&E services in the world, and Scotland has the best performing A&E services in the UK. I think we should say a massive thank you to our NHS staff for that.
Kezia Dugdale. I asked the First Minister about the stress that NHS staff are under, and she just clapped herself on the back as a result of all of that. She did. And yet again, that was a long response, but not actually an answer to the question that I asked. So let me give her the answer. Figures obtained by Scottish Labour show that last year, NHS staff lost more than 287,000 days because of stress. That's an increase of 21% compared to just 2 years ago. And this really matters because it puts vital NHS services facing SNP cuts under even more pressure. One of those services is the children's ward at St John's Hospital in Livingston, which is currently under review and potentially under threat of closure. Now, I know the First Minister will tell us it's a decision for the Health Board, but she has overruled officials before, and she should do so again now. My constituents would like a simple yes or no answer to this question. Can the First Minister confirm, once and for all, that she will not allow the children's ward at St John's to be either closed or downgraded?
First Minister, well, firstly, can I say In response to the point about stress of people working in our NHS, I started my answer to Kezia Dugdale by recognising the contribution of those who work in our NHS. But I also said, and this was a point that Kezia Dugdale clearly chose to ignore, that since this government took office, there has been an increase in the number of people working in our NHS of 10,500. So, yet again, presiding officer, what we have in this chamber is a divide between the Labour Party who come here and present what they describe as problems, and an SNP government getting on with the job of delivering the solutions for our NHS and other public services in Scotland. And on the question of St John's Hospital, interestingly, Kezia Dugdale's first question was asking me to listen to the Royal College of GPs, to the Royal College of Nursing, which I said we always do, but her second question was asking me to say now, before an independent review has concluded, that I will ignore any recommendations for the Royal College for Paediatrics, which is the organisation carrying out the independent review that she talks about. But can I also say I will take absolutely no lectures from Scottish Labour when it comes to St John's Hospital in Livingston. Because when I took office as Health Secretary in 2007, Labour had taken away from St John's Hospital services like trauma orthopaedics and emergency surgery. There were concerns locally that St John's was going to be downgraded from being an acute hospital, possibly even closed as a hospital. Since then, this government has protected A&E services at St John's with consultant cover extended. We've invested £3 million in a new MRI scanner at St John's. We've invested £7 million in capital funding for short-stay elective surgery. There's been a £300,000 investment in respiratory services at St John's. We've refurbished the labour ward and the special care baby unit. We opened a new laboratory medicine training school. We've invested £3.3 million in an endoscopy unit. We've opened a regional eating disorders unit. And of course, of the 5 new elective treatment centres that we plan over the next Parliament, one of them is planned to be at St John's Hospital. This government has protected St John's Hospitals from the cuts that were imposed on it by the former Labour administration.
Kezia Dugdale. Miss Dugdale, order. Order. Miss Dugdale.
Presiding officer, if she's so good at protecting services at St John's, why can't she protect the Children's Hospital? That's simple. Perhaps, presiding officer, the truth is that St John's isn't being reviewed or closed, it's just being reprofiled. And actually, people can see that this government is pulling the wool over their eyes. Because it was just this week.
Order.
As the reprofiler-in-chief, presiding officer, parking from the sidelines. Just this week, we had emails uncovered by my colleague Neil Finlay revealing that the Health Secretary had been pressurising officials to delay a decision into St John's until after the election. And now we know the First Minister won't guarantee that the children's ward will stay open. Kicking unpopular decisions into the long grass is becoming a hallmark of this government, and it's not just in the Lothians. We know that NHS Glasgow and Clyde is preparing for budget cuts of up to £60 million, including the closure of services and cuts to staff numbers. The First Minister has it within her power to stop this happening. She can save the Lightburn Hospital and protect the children's ward at the RAH. She can secure emergency care at the Vale of Leven and protect NHS staff numbers in Glasgow. So can the First Minister give today a 100% guarantee right now that all of these services will be protected in their current form?
First Minister.
I hate to be the bearer of more bad news, certainly bad news if you happen to be Kezia Dugdale. I was the Health Secretary that saved Lightburn Hospital in Glasgow. That's possibly one of the many facts that has just escaped Kezia Dugdale's preparation for today's First Minister's questions. Can I give her a tip? It is really good when you're asking questions to be able to adapt the questions in response to the detailed factual answers that you get. The truth of the matter, presiding officer, is that this is the government that has protected St John's Hospital, protected St John's Hospital from the cuts that were planned the last Labour administration. We will go on taking the decisions that protect St John's Hospital and hospitals right around our country. And finally, Presiding Officer, this time last week, if memory serves me correctly, Kezia Dugdale was asking me to invest more money in local authorities. Today she's asking us to put more money into the National Health Service. She's yet to tell us where any of this extra money is coming from. So I will issue an open invitation to her today. Here's the draft budget. It is a draft budget. I'm happy to pass it over, and if Kezia Dugdale wants to send it back to me, marking where Labour wants to cut things in this budget to pay for the extra money that they keep talking about, I'll be happy to listen. The fact of the matter is, Presiding Officer, we don't get any ideas from Kezia Dugdale or Labour, we just get whinging from the sidelines. The focus group that was published this week that Labour tried to suppress said voters recall Labour trotting out.
Order!
It's okay, Presiding Officer, I wasn't going to quote this. For Scottish voters, Labour is indistinguishable from the Tories, just less competent. I wasn't going to quote that. What I was going to quote was this one. Voters recall Labour trotting out a long list of policies with no conviction that they could deliver them. Nothing, absolutely nothing is changed. That shower's not fit for opposition, let alone government.
Kezia Dugdale. Miss Dugdale.
She read one quote there from a focus group presiding officer. The only person acting like a Tory in this chamber this week is John Swinney, who's enforcing austerity on all the councils across Scotland.
Order! Order! Miss Dugdale. Order!
And again, presiding officer, any very specific question about services in our hospitals across the country, there was no direct commitment to save these services, and that will be noted by everyone. Because the First Minister had a chance to provide much needed relief to thousands of staff and families across the country. She could have guaranteed that the proposed cuts to NHS services would not take place, but she didn't do that today. So let that message go out to people across the Lothians, to patients in Glasgow and in Paisley, to families in Dumbartonshire, and to people the length and breadth of this country. Isn't it the case that whilst the SNP say they will protect our NHS, the reality is they are threatening our local services with the axe?
First Minister.
Look, yet again we have from Labour whinging about what the SNP, in their view, is doing wrong, with no concrete proposals for what we need to do differently. Now, I am going to be asking Parliament, John Swinney is going to be asking Parliament in a few weeks' time to vote for a budget that delivers extra funding of £500 million to the NHS next year. For the first time, the budget for the health portfolio is going to reach £13 billion. I think when we took office, it was £9 billion. There are 10,500 more people working today in our NHS. We've protected local services that Labour were planning to close. Does anybody remember Monklands and Ayr accident and emergency units that were facing the axe under Labour that are still open treating patients today because this SNP government saved them? So I am more than happy, Presiding Officer, to put the health record of this government to the people of Scotland in a couple of months' time and ask them to judge it against the woeful record and the woeful present record of this Labour opposition.